Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the CBA Podcast, a place where we chat about our own recent achievements in the area of electronics, software and mechanical engineering, and more likely than not, give excuses for not having done anything at all. This time we'll talk about software development on retrocomputers, components lacking documentation, disassembling a toaster, and useful equipment around the workshop. Hello and welcome back. In an attempt for myself to finish recording the podcast a bit faster, I'm running my laptop off the battery instead of the mains, and the battery is not 100% okay, so let's see if that works. First of all, I think I talked last time and the times before that already about my Retro Challenge project, which was a Commodore 64 cartridge adapter. Now, I finished it last time already, but now I found a bug, fixed that and deployed, so to say, 2 units at different places, and I intend to run them or let them run for a month or something like that and then check if they still run, and if they still run then that's fine. Now for this project I made software on a Commodore 64 home computer, which is a model from 1983. In case you're not familiar with retro computers, or what's now called retro computers, it's most of the time a box with the keyboard integrated and the electronics integrated, and you plug a composite or RF TV or screen to it and then plug it in the wall and then you start typing, and usually it comes with a integrated or separate disk drive or tape drive. Commodore 64 is typically used with a disk drive. Now I like home computers like these because to me it was an interesting point in computer evolution, so to say, where you had a lot of different computers, although there were only 1 or 2 popular CPUs, and most of the computers looked a little bit alike inside, electronics wise, but on the outside they were really radically different, and people were trying out what worked and what didn't work, and so you saw a lot of very different models. And I think after that, at least it seems like that to me, 1985 and 1990 and onwards, it was mostly PCs and mostly boring computers, and I'm not really interested in that. I'm also not interested in Apples, by the way. For me, software development on the Commodore 64 now is, well, quality-wise, pretty much the same as I did 25 years or 30 years ago. But the development environment is radically different, because back then you would do everything on the computer itself. So you would have the assembler and the drawing program and the cruncher and I don't know what. Do it all on the computer itself and use different disks and different images, and at the end you would, if you were making a demo for example, you would integrate everything and make one crunched or compressed executable, and then that was it. But now you would do everything, I think everything on the PC. You would only use the Commodore 64 if at all, because you can do most stuff from the emulator. But now you would use a Commodore 64 just as a target platform. At least for me, and I would do most development on the PC, and that's really a big difference to have a cross-development environment, because you have fancy painting programs, you have all kinds of scripting languages, that's a practical thing. You also have the internet to look up everything you want, and it's so much easier. Archiving is easier, uploading, debugging is easier, everything is easier. So development environment I think is very different from what it was. However, software quality of my own stuff on the Commodore 64 is pretty much the same as it was 25 years ago. But perhaps now I focus a little bit more on the composition first. That is, first start with a big picture of what you want to make, what it should look like roughly, and then fill it in with details, approaching as close as possible to what you wanted to make. And back in the day I would take my mental toolbox, so to say, so little effects I knew how to make, and make a composition out of that. So that was a different approach. And the type of software I like for old computers and new computers is mostly demo related, so demos and visual effects and so on. And I like them on new PCs as well, new computers, although I don't understand new computers completely, and I don't know what's possible and what's not, or what's easy and what's not, so I cannot appreciate a demo on a modern PC completely. And I think I have a better understanding of some older computers, and I know what's possible and know what's difficult and easy, so I can appreciate work on those computers a little bit more. So that's the kind of stuff I like to make for old computers as well. And I know my coding skills are nowhere near those of the demo scene, what's going on right now for those computers, but for me it's just about having fun, and I know my work is not as good as other stuff, but I don't really care. I just want to have fun and use a home computer as a platform to meet other people, or to talk about stuff, to exchange ideas, or to show stuff, or to get to know other people, something like that. Something completely different, I went to a hackalot monthly meeting. Hackalot is the upcoming hackerspace in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And that was pretty nice. It talked about a new possible location, and I think maybe pretty soon they have an actual location so we can meet there and can actually become a member, become a paying member, and contribute a little bit and help with moving into the new location. I also went to the monthly repair day at the local retrocomputer place, and when I went there I took my Commodore 64 stuff with me and donated that to that place because I'm pretty much finished with the Commodore 64 now for a while. I think I'll focus on other stuff. And when I was there, to be honest, I didn't repair a whole lot of stuff. I just dropped off stuff and talked with another guy about driving an LCD from software and looked at some projects that he made, and it was very nice. Maybe in the future I want to use a cheap, very cheap LCD in something that's disposable display for a museum or something like that. The laptop battery is at 77% now, by the way. Now, as a segue from LCDs, some of these LCDs and some other components, like RF modules in my case just now, come with very crappy documentation. And when I found myself using a component and I don't know how something works and documentation is missing, and I find myself visiting forums for information, then that's a big alarm bell on my head telling me that that is not the right component to choose, right? And every once in a while I seem to fall into a trap of choosing crappy components with documentation that doesn't exist or is looked nice at first but turns out to be a piece of crap. A little while ago we talked about disassembling a bread toaster, and I did one before and now I got another one that was a little bit more advanced than the previous one. The previous one worked with a mechanical timer or a bimetal strip that would heat up and then release the lever. This one had an actual electromagnet and actual electronics inside. It had a programmable timer which you can, which basically ran from an RC oscillator and drove a electromagnet to release a lever. Now I didn't reverse engineer it in that much detail, but the most interesting thing to me was the power supply. Because the basic thing about a bread toaster, I think, is it's a big fat resistor. And in this case it was a 80 ohm resistor, something like that, and combined with 230 volts, that's about 650 watts. What they did for to power the logic, the digital logic inside, they used a tap of the heating element. So the last 4 ohms on one side was simply tapped off and half-wave rectified to serve as the power supply for the digital logic, because you have a very big resistor anyway, so it's easy to simply tap off that to get a drop voltage. So I thought it was very smart. Didn't see that before, because usually it's a bad thing to burn a lot of power to have a resistor dropper, but this thing is a big resistor in itself, so I thought it was pretty smart. So if you didn't fall asleep already, you may fall asleep now, because I'm about to go over some of the stuff I use often or seldom in my workplace, and they have to do with mechanical engineering and electronic engineering. I divided the stuff into 4 categories. First is stuff I use all the time. Second, stuff I use often enough. Third is stuff I seldomly use. And fourth is stuff I really never use. I'll try to go over these a little bit quickly. In random order, stuff I use all the time. A microscope, soldering iron, knife, handheld DMM, oscilloscope, power supply, flat nose cutters, tweezers, a quick test thing, which is a 230 volt clamp thing where you can quickly clamp wires to 230 volt to test mains equipment, screwdriver, wire stripper, programming dongle. A friend of mine came up with that to program microcontrollers or flashes, for example. A friend of mine also came up with the USB to serial dongle. I don't use it that much, but he apparently does. And he also uses a mains voltage tester. That's a neon bulb screwdriver thing a lot. I don't think I even have one, to be honest. Now a little bit of the weird stuff I use all the time. A whiteboard. I use it a lot. I have a lot of whiteboards and I use it for everything. Then I have a heavy duty wire cutter. It's a wire cutter. It's in between a pliers and a scissors, and I cut everything with that. PCBs and metal and plastic and paper and everything. Measurement leads can make a big difference. For the normal stuff I have Hirschman micro claps, I don't know how to call it. It's 2mm very light clips that you can clip onto wires and even clip on the leads of through-hole ICs, DIL ICs for example. That's no problem. For oscilloscope probes I got the lightest probes that I could find, the lightest in weight. I have some wire holders that are basically a rod with rolls of wires hanging off it in a frame. I have one for very big wires, 0.75 millimeter square, and some other frame for small wires and solder wire and rework wire and so on. It works very well. Then Chemtech wipes. These are tissues basically, but I use them a lot. Then I have an electrical soldering tip cleaner. Now people have told me I'm crazy for buying that thing, but that's the best thing ever. So you just stick your soldering iron in it and 1 second later it's clean and no dirt on it and the oxidation is gone and very, very clean, very nice. And last but not least, lamps. Lamps are very important. I have 4 and I just bought a 5th magnifying lens lamp, which is a circular lamp on an arm. And you can swivel it wherever you need light. And I don't use a magnifying lens that much, but just a light that you can get exactly where you want it. That's very important to me. Now that was that. On to stuff I use often enough, so it's useful to have. In random order again, the infrared camera. Desoldering tweezers, so the soldering iron with 2 tips. A breadboard, a Dremel, calipers, hot glue, reflow oven, hot air gun, a pocket DMM, so a very small DMM that you can toss in your bag. A decade box, I'm not even sure if it's called that, with resistors. And last but not least, a reptile egg hatcher, which is a box with a Peltier element in it. It can cool down to -7 degrees or something like that and cool heat up to 60 degrees. I mostly only use the heating function. And I use that to put components in it, electronic components and PCBs in it. When I had them laying around for a while, sucking up moisture, I put them in there for a day or 2 days and dry them at 60 degrees and before I put them into the reflow oven. Now onto stuff that I seldom use, and once again this is just my personal collection of stuff. I guess you have your own needs and your own stuff. Stuff I seldom use is an electronic DC load, function generator, LCR meter, bench DMM, thermocouple meter, small spectrum analyzer, handheld spectrum analyzer, and a loop or a magnifying lens. Now the bench DMMs, I have 4 of those, actually 5 but 4 simple ones, and 1 handheld DMM. What I should have done is get 2 bench DMMs and 2 handheld DMMs, and I would probably save some money in the process. Now onto stuff that I never ever use, in random order again. A frequency counter, an endoscope, big spectrum analyzer, AC power supply, 6.5 digit HP bench DMM, a solder pot, a soldering fume sucker, solder feed iron, and magnifying glasses. The magnifying glasses I bought at some point, didn't use them, gave them away, bought a new set, which I don't use now, so that doesn't make sense. The soldering fume sucker I used once, I think, for a project where I had to solder literally thousands of wires. So I used that, and I also used a solder pot then, which is basically about 6 square centimeters. Well, a soldering iron with a 6 square centimeters compartment with molten solder in it, so you can simply dip wires in flux and then dip them in the solder and then they are tinned. I used that, but now it's sitting in the shelf, not doing anything. The HP bench DMM is a very accurate meter. It's quite big and heavy and long, and I bought it because I thought it was a good idea to have a really accurate meter, but in fact I don't really need an accurate meter or anything more accurate than my Fluke DMM, so that thing is never ever used. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the big spectrum analyzer that I mentioned. Now, at some point I got a little bit smart, because spending money on stuff you never ever use is not an extremely good idea. So I wanted a spectrum analyzer, and an entry model new is 1,000 or 2,000 euros. Now instead I bought an older model, second hand, to see if I would actually use it. And you know what? It's just standing on the shelf, never used, except for playing with. So I saved some money in the process. So that was it basically, and what I'll do next is, for my CPU project that I made a while ago, at least I'll record one video showing the difference between the old model and the new model. So there should be a video of a few minutes, and probably gonna make that this week. Also, I'm gonna start some new hobby stuff, maybe some gadgets for the electromagnetic field camp in September, so you can play a game in a weird, creative way. No idea. Maybe find a new home computer to play with. I have some other ideas listed, so we'll see it when we see it. So that was all for now. For more information, links and previous episodes, visit podcast.cba.si. Stay tuned, thanks for listening, and goodbye.